Chari Yasoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Rad Amadava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya I brought the Kindle here with the people that don't have books or sheets of paper. You can read it off here. Who has it on the phone? Anybody have it on the phone? Okay, who wants to come and get this? You can all read together. You can get it on your phone. Here it's text 11. So that's for a few people, all right? Be careful not to drop that one. See, she can carry all of Prabhupada's books in one hand. How about that? Okay. So, it is 4:14:11. You see it there? Okay. Narupita Praja Palaha Sa Jikha Sati Vai Prajaha Tatapi Santavye Mamum Nasmams Tat Patakam Spriset Niripita Prajapalaha Sajikham Sativai Prajaha Tatapi santavye mamum nasmam stat patakam spriset nirupita prajapala sajikam sativai prajaha tatapi santavye mamum nasmam stat patakam spriset nirupita prajapalaha sajikam sativai prajaha tatapi santavye mamum nasam stat patakam spriset. Repeat. Others? Then when you're done, you can bring it back. I'll put it away. Yes? Want to bring the Kindle back? Hey. Nirupita Praja. Thank you. Your turn. Okay, word for word meaning. Nirupita, appointed. Prajapalaha, the king. Sa, he. Jighamsati, desires to harm. Vai, certainly. Prajaha, the citizens. Tata api, nevertheless. Santavyema, we should pacify. Amum, him. Na, not. Asman, us. Tat, his. Patakam, sinful result. Spriset, may touch. Translation. We appointed this Vena, king of the state, in order to give protection to the citizens, but now has become the enemy of the citizens. Despite all these discrepancies, we should at once try to pacify him. By doing so, we may not be touched by the sinful results caused by him. Repeat after me the verse. We appointed this King Venu of the state in order to give protection to the citizens. But now he has become the enemy of the citizens. Despite all these discrepancies, we should at once try to pacify him. By doing so, we may not be touched by the sinful results caused by him. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The saintly kings elected King Vena to become king, but he proved to be mischievous. Therefore the sages were very much afraid of incurring sinful reaction. The law of karma prohibits a person even to associate with a mischievous individual. By electing Vena to the throne, the saintly sages certainly associated with him. Ultimately, King Venu became so mischievous that the saintly sages actually became afraid of becoming contaminated by his activities. Thus, before taking any action against him, the sages tried to pacify him and correct him so that he might turn from his mischief. So there's several things to be concerned here. They didn't want to be contaminated by this King Venu. If someone, there's three kinds of devotees. The Kanishta Adhikari just cares about himself and the deity. And there's the Madhyamadhikari who worships God. He makes friends with devotees. He helps the innocent, but he stays away from the demons, the destructive people. Now, if you're an Uttama Adhikari, like Lord Nityananda, is Balaram himself, or a pure devotee, then you can approach these people. But we shouldn't go, as we say, beyond our pay grade. We shouldn't try to approach these kinds of people. And we see that even in the Vedic society, if they appointed someone as a king, there was some kind of recourse. The problem with any system is the people involved with it. That's why, in one sense, if you have a good monarch, he is better because he doesn't have to try to get the votes of people and convince them to give the votes. Because one of the problems there is some of the things people say to get elected. They say, we're going to decrease the taxes, but we're going to increase all the benefits. And that sounds good, but it's the worst thing you can do, because now you're decreasing the income while the expenses are going higher. You have to say something practical, but most people don't know something practical. They're not educated on what is actually good for them and what is not good for them. So we find that the problem was when monarchy came later, you had these kings. Jai Sachinandan was talking about Henry VIII. We had Ivan the Terrible. The fact that he was called Ivan the Terrible gives an indication he must not have been so good. People like Genghis Khan and his grandson Kublai Khan, they took over more territory than anybody did ever. That's why Mongolia is such an influential nation today, right? Mongolia actually controlled more territory than any country in history. But where are they today? That is the problem there. So the sages had the ability to remove such a person. You see, in the other cases, you have people like the ones we mentioned, and kings who were bad, who couldn't be removed because they're an absolute monarch. You see that in Russia, whenever opposition comes up against Putin, he tries to poison them or something goes wrong. And so in one sense, the monarchies can be better, but it also can be worse, because if there's no system in check, like the Brahmins, to decide that if he's doing a bad job, they can take him out. That's why in those kind of situations, democracy may be imperfect, but at least there's a chance to vote the people out. But the trouble is, the people with money do the most influencing, and they engage in voter suppression. If you suppress one group of people from voting, then you can control the election. So the idea is what we should do, as Prabhupada wanted to start a Brahminical society, we don't go out and try to force any change of governments, but we try to see if there's any people we can influence in any way. We don't take one side and run out with the banner, but we try to influence them. Just maybe they can take something and get it. Just like Boris Yeltsin, he got a book in 1975, and when the communists tried to take over again in the 90s, he got up on the tank and said, "You will not do this," and he stopped the hardliner takeover. And after that, the books were going like anything. More than half of the books in the world at that time were being distributed in Russia. Sometimes like 56%. Now India is the biggest country, but at that time. So we try to influence these people so that maybe they will get a few good qualities. One says if someone has a few good qualities, at least they're better than someone that has none. In one sense, another sense, if someone's not a devotee and not a pure devotee, of course there's so many things lacking. But sometimes we just have to see people who are at least a little bit pious, who can do little things, who at least they don't try to stop the Sankirtan movement. At least they don't try to inhibit the preaching activities. So we try to influence them to help us, and then we try to influence people to become devotees of the Lord and better people. They see that now he's become an enemy of the state. Here's an interesting thing. Krishna talks in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita about the divine and the demoniac qualities. And you can add up the qualities of the person, see which this King Venu was. The divine qualities are fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity, simplicity, nonviolence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault-finding, compassion for all living entities. Does he sound like he had that? He didn't have aversion to fault-finding. He was finding faults with the people who were doing the right things. And other qualities are compassion for all living entities, freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, and freedom from envy and the passion for honor. So these are the divine qualities. He didn't seem to have those. He had more of the demonic qualities like pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. And we see that he didn't have compassion for the living entities. He just wanted to take the power and take it away from them. He was certainly fearful of his own condition. That's why he's trying to stop the Brahmins from doing activities. He's definitely not purifying his existence. He's certainly not giving in charity. We see so many leaders like this, right? See, do they have these divine qualities? Are they doing austerities? Are they cultivating spiritual knowledge? Do they have compassion for all living entities? When he doesn't add up to these things, he becomes the enemy of the people or the enemy of the state. Quite often it's like the people in charge. It's like putting the fox in charge of guarding the hen house. The fox may make sure no other foxes come to eat the hens. And what's the best way for that fox to make sure that no other foxes come to eat the hens? What could he do to make sure that they don't? He eat them all himself, yes. If he eats them all himself. So this is a demoniac thinking. The demoniac thinking, people have unclean habits. They don't know what is to be done and what is not to be done. They think what's right is wrong and what's wrong is right. At least in the mode of goodness, you know what the proper activities that you should do are. In the mode of passion, you're a little confused because you have some idea about what's right. But at the same time, your own desires come in, so it's mixed. Maybe I should do the right thing, but I also have to satisfy my own desires. So these desires become anarthas, stumbling blocks, because then they confuse someone. Is that there was the show in the 50s, Jack Benny, and he was famous for being a real miser, really cheap. And the thief put the gun in his head and says, your money or your life? And he doesn't say anything. He says, come on, your money or your life? He says, I'm thinking about it. It's a difficult decision, because he's so attached to his money. And that's the way we're thinking about these materialistic desires. You're thinking your desires or ultimate spiritual life. And you'll die from the desires. You're thinking about it. But what can these things do? Ultimately, they're just a stumbling block, and they're getting in our way of progress. But we're confused about what to do. And if we're not sure where we're going, it's very hard to get there, isn't it? If your destination, like Prabhupada says, back to home, back to Godhead. So in one sense, it's very simple. We accept all the things that are favorable for progressing in devotional service and going back to Godhead. And we reject all the things that are unfavorable for service and going back to Godhead. And it should be very simple, but it turns out it may not be easy, because our mind is changing the value system. You know, when we give a talk to people, we have to look at what we're trying to do. There's three kinds of speeches. One is you're just giving some information. That's why if you go to a class about Hinduism and they give information, they may not, it's like if someone gives you a class on the history of music, or someone shows you how to play an instrument. We show someone how to do it. And another kind of talk is we get a change of value. When someone has a change of value, everything changes. Just like when the friend of mine was shooting at the animals and he squished the dove, and I said, that's a cruel thing to do. And he said, well, you eat meat, don't you? I said, yes. He said, how many animals do they have to kill for you to eat meat? I said, probably a lot. He said, so does it make me any worse to kill one more bird when all those animals are being killed for you to eat meat? Now there's a change of value, right? Now all of a sudden you find that the value is not in eating this meat. The value is in staying away from it. So we try to create a change of value in people wherever we can, even if the people seem to be a little demonic or a little unqualified. And then from beyond that, you give a call to action. Like on Sunday when we're talking, the idea was not to give an idea about the history of book distribution, but the idea was to get people to participate in it. Like we can give a class on japa, and then we show people how to chant. This is a call to action, that you want people to do something. Because if you just give a description without any directions for somebody, it won't motivate them necessarily to do something. So we see here in this system, the trouble with the absolute leaders, if you have the right one, they can do the right thing because they don't have to answer to anybody. But actually they do. They have to be willing to answer to the guru, the shastras, and the sadhus. If they think that they're in charge and nobody has to vote them in or out, they can make decisions and change them. And the trouble in some of them, in the parliamentary governments, the parliament can take somebody out. You need like 2/3 of the votes in America to, first you have to impeach a president from the Senate or House of Representatives, and then the other body has to remove them from office. And it's a very difficult thing to do, because generally people toe a party line. They support a person no matter what. And that's why we have to support the principles of Krishna consciousness more than we would support any particular person. Now, of course, we have Prabhupada, our founder Acharya, who exhibits the principles of Krishna consciousness. But if someone comes along who is representing, that means representing, but it turns out they're not representing, but they're presenting someone else, something else, then we don't follow that. This is why people had trouble after Prabhupada first left. There were some gurus that took themselves too seriously, and they were zonal acharyas. You couldn't get initiated by anybody who was in that particular zone. But then they realized the better way. The other extreme, you had the Ritvik that say, let's have no guru. Let's just have Prabhupada and let's study Prabhupada's books. So which one should we have? Do we study Prabhupada's books, or do we take a living guru? Which one is it? What? You do both, but they have to be in line with each other. That's why now the new system is that you study Prabhupada's books, you find someone who can teach you in those books, and then you accept that person to guide you personally. So you do have Prabhupada in the books. That part of the Ritvik is correct. And the other part is correct, that you get a new guru, but they have to be in line. The Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu have to be in line. It's like two lines of the railway track. If one goes this way and one goes that way, the train has a problem. But if someone has studied these books, just like the Brahmanas have studied, to see if this person is qualified, they put him in, and then find out that he's not qualified, they take him out. And that's why in ISKCON we have that check and balance. Somebody's guru can lead them to Krishna. But if they find that that person is not representing the principles, we have a governing body commission that Prabhupada followed the orders of his guru, who wanted a governing body commission for the Gaudiya Math, and they never did it. They all tried to become their own acharyas. If I become an acharya, it doesn't matter if I make mistakes, I'm in charge. Right or wrong, I'm in charge, right? Right or wrong, I'm always right. Isn't it? Might makes right, they say. So the people can be removed, and we have to be intelligent enough to see that this guru really does represent Prabhupada. If they're doing something else and they're teaching tantric things, or their habits are not according to what they're asking you to do, then you don't follow them, because ultimately we're following Prabhupada. So just like here, the Brahmanas put somebody in, but they could take someone out. So the system of having a guru or a king may be good as long as there is a body of people who can keep it in check and balance in case something goes wrong. Some of the people conclude, well, one guru is initiating, every single one could never make a mistake. And some people say one made a mistake, so they all must be completely faulty. And these are definitely fallacious conditions. To offend in that way, some of those people in the Ritvik think that anybody who is initiating is just offending Prabhupada, because they shouldn't be initiating. And they say all this information is given in the hidden tapes. You know, in the hidden tapes it says all the money should be given to me. Did you know that? What's in the hidden tapes? Whatever I decide is in there, right? You didn't know that was in the hidden tapes? It's funny, they said that every month Tamal Krishna would give Smarahari a box of tapes, and they would take it together to go and destroy. Well, a box of tapes is just a small amount of things, especially in Prabhupada's In the Last Day, and no such thing ever happened. So the trouble with the conspiracy theories is when people see too many conspiracies, they may miss what's actually going on. It's kind of like being paranoid. If you think everybody's following you, and someone is, if you actually think everyone is following you, The fact that you think that, does it make it easier or harder to figure out who's actually following you? What do you think? Which is it? That's Sachinandan. If you're paranoid and you think everyone is following you, does that make it easier to identify the one person who is following you, or harder? It makes it harder because you think everybody's following you. It's going to be difficult to see like which one turned here and did that because you think all of them are. So when devotees try to find faults with Prabhupada's disciples who are trying to carry on this Krishna consciousness, they're not only being offensive, but it's being counterproductive because you want people to be initiated and go on in Krishna consciousness. And so when people are doing it properly, they're given all encouragement. And if they're not, there's steps to remove such people. But we don't start removing people when there's no need to, just because someone makes up a story. That was a Salem witch hunt in Salem, Massachusetts. If I could accuse someone of being a witch and then they tried them in the trial, then I would get all their property. And this is again back to this demoniac person. If I decide someone is bad and I accuse them of being unholy and they burn them at the stake, then I'm a good person. Am I? No, because I've falsely accused someone and they're tortured to death for it. And on the grounds of being holy, I'm saying I discovered the witch, whereas actually all I've done is falsely accuse someone to get their property. So this is a mode of ignorance like that. You see they had stories about the Nazi prison guards that had the Jews interned in the camps, and the guards were saying, well, they presented themselves as a victim. They say, we had to kill these Jewish children because they're going to grow up and they're going to work in business and they're going to exploit us and make our life difficult. So if we don't get rid of them now, they're going to make life difficult for us later. They're killing small children, and yet they're presenting themselves as if they're the victim. This is the demoniac qualities in the mode of ignorance, to think right is wrong and wrong is right. To think that to persecute a certain group of people, if I just decide people are bad, you're bad and I'm good. Therefore, if I steal from you, it's okay because you're bad. And I didn't do anything wrong because I'm good. But they have that saying, pretty is as pretty does. You can't decide you're a certain caste or a certain quality of person just by birth or just because you were appointed to that. Right? It's like Prabhupada says, you can put the dog on the king's throne, but if you throw a shoe, he'll still chase it. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that it's guna karma vibhagashaha. It's based on qualities and the action. So we don't judge people by how many votes they get or what the color of their skin is or what family they were born in, but it's actions and qualities that they have. That's what's important. And so these Brahmins can put somebody in charge, but when they find out that their actions are actually against the people, they can remove them. And so this is something that they needed to watch very carefully, was how these the other things you can see with the demoniac people is that they think that the whole purpose of life is just how to gratify my senses. That's how it's good. If it gratifies my senses, it's good. What was that song in the 60s? It goes, they say the best things in life are free. Those kind of things I don't need. Give me money. That's what I want. Give me money. Right? That's what it is. Give me money. So that's what they're thinking, because if you get the money, you have the power, and then you can do all the things to gratify your senses, but it may not help you out. The person that has no money may not be able to buy enough drugs to overdose. The person with plenty of money buys and overdoses very easily. So his life is more successful? Not exactly. But the interesting thing is that when you judge people, then you have to see how to deal with them. It's just like I taught my children that you don't react to things. If there's a product to be sold or someone is presenting themselves, first you take the information in about them, and then you consider it carefully, and then you think what the proper action is. So the sages saw that even though King Venu appeared to be a demoniac person, it's how you deal with it that's important. You have to start with the easy part. First, you try to talk to them nicely, see if they understand, and then maybe they understand and abdicate their position, and maybe you can solve it that way. Because once you can't go to antagonism, you can't go back, right? I heard this story, and these two kids who were roommates lived near the temple, and roommate number one let a girl stay the night, and then he and that girl left, right? So a guy comes and knocks on the door to roommate two, and he says, "Where's that girl? She has my truck, and unless you tell me where she is and the truck is, I'm going to beat you up." And he says, "It's not my friend. I have no idea." He says, "Well, I'm going to beat you up." And then the guy goes away and comes back 15 minutes later. And he says, "Could you be a bro and do me a favor if she comes back and tell me that she's here with my truck?" And the roommate too said, "You should have asked me that first, because you can always threaten me later, but once you've threatened me, you can't ask for favors, can you?" So maybe you do have to threaten later, but you can't threaten today and ask for favors tomorrow, can you? So in our dealings with people, you can ask nicely, "Can you return the money that you owe?" Just like in America, they have the small claims court. But before you go to small claims court, you have to ask the person. But you can't threaten them. You have to ask them, "Can you please repay the money that you borrowed or the money that you owe?" And then if they don't respond or say no, then you can go to court. So we have to deal with the actions where we, like Prabhupada says, you make a bold proposal in a humble way. Which sounds more antagonistic? "I need 100 Rand from you, and I need it right now." Or if I say, "You know what, we're doing a big project down below, and I really need like 100 million Rand, but if I can get 10% from you, don't worry, I'll get the other 90% later." Now, which sounded more pleasing? The first one or second one? But in the first one, I'm only asking for 100 Rand. The second one, I'm asking for 10 million Rand. I'm saying it's 100 million, but you only have to come up with 10%. Don't worry. That's like when I do the books. I'd say, "I have this. Do you want the 1,200 Rand set or the starter set of 750? You start easy. You don't try to threaten people in the beginning. I had that when my daughter and my granddaughter, we bought a 3-unit building, and because we got a low rate because we occupy 1 unit. So we had to remove one tenant. It looked like these tenants were selling drugs. They had burned holes in the wood floor. So we had to remove one because we have to live in one. So this was upstairs. It was the best unit, but in the worst shape. So if you're going to fix something, you might as well fix the one that's destroyed instead of the one that's still 75% okay, because you have to destroy something that looks good. So after I moved in, I'm chanting japa, and I hear these 4 people down below screaming for the past tenants. And I said, "Those people aren't there. I moved them out." And they said, "Well, if you're hiding them, we're going to come back after you and your whole family." So I thought better not to say anything. Better leave them wondering. You don't want to make threats and then have to take it back, right? It's much better to think about something carefully than say, "I'm really sorry I said that and did that. I shouldn't have done that." It's funny, as a child, my mother told me, as long as I admit that I did something wrong, I won't get in trouble. So at 3 years old, I flushed a teddy bear down the toilet at my grandmother's house, and water came all over. I said to my mother, "I shouldn't have ought to done that." And my grandmother was not happy as the water was coming out. So it's much better not to do it than to try to ask for forgiveness. So after they said they were going to come back after me and my whole family, the one girl said, "Can you do me a favor and show me they're not there?" And so I'm analyzing it and saying she's not angry at me. The same people that owe me money because they left it damaged owe her money. So I said, okay, the 3 other people stay down below. Let the girl come up. So I showed her all around. And I said, see, they're not here. She goes, well, thank you so much for showing me they're not here. And then I said, here's a piece of friendly advice for you. I said, first you threatened me, and then you asked a favor. I said, next time it might be smarter to ask favors of people before you threaten them instead of after. She goes, oh, I am so sorry. She goes, what can I do for you? I said, make sure anybody that knows those people or they owe money to knows that they're not there. She goes, you got it. I'll make sure that that doesn't happen. So, you have to think of what's the point you're trying to do, like when you're distributing books. One girl was telling me, I think it was in Delhi, that people start arguing strange points. But if that's not the point, then you say, you know what, that might be a good idea. But can I show you something first? You try to go to the easy things. You don't engage in arguments with people just because they engage. If she gets mad, is it more important that I prove to her I can also get mad? Or let her know that those people aren't here and it's better to ask the favor first, which is the better thing to do. To scream back and threaten to do this and threaten to do that. You don't threaten. You either call the police or come out with a gun, or you don't. But threatening doesn't help you. If I say, on Tuesday I'm coming to your house with a gun and I'm going to collect money. Well, by Tuesday you either run away or you get your own gun, right? So when they were dealing with King Venu, it's better first to try to pacify them and ask them to do the right thing first, and then later you might take action. It's funny, in America some people fall for this, that somebody calls them up and says, you owe money for your taxes and you have to send a gift card and you're going to jail. Well, you don't go to jail for paying it. What they do is they don't threaten you. They send you a letter saying, please pay the amount you owe so we don't have to pursue further action. And if it gets too big and goes on too long, someone comes home, there's a seal on their house, the car is gone, the bank account's frozen. So they don't say we're going to repossess your car, take possession of your house, and garnish your wages and freeze your bank account, because if they do, then the people take steps. They just say further action, and once they do. So what we should try to do, like these Brahmins, first you try to pacify. You don't threaten all kinds of action and then not take it. And if action needs to be taken, then you take the action. But you start first with trying to pacify. Because once you've gone to antagonism, if you're trying to work out something and then you sue them, and then you call up and say, well, maybe we should work something out. You try all that first. You can't go, because once you've gone to antagonism, you can't go back. So that's the point that's being made here, is that first you try to pacify them, and if that doesn't work, you may take some other action. But you have to try the easy things first. Just like I said to one neighbor he would always let his car alarm go off early. I says, can you not let it go off early? He says, yes. You state the obvious in just a plain voice. So are there any questions or comments about this here? I'm sure others could, yes. Microphone? Yes.
We see that gradually.
This was longer. Mars Pritha was more than 5,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah, but.
What yuga was this? Satya Yuga, wasn't it?
Yeah. Dhruva. Yeah, Satya.
No, this is Prithu.
Yeah, well, Dhruva is the descendants of Dhruva.
Yes. Yeah. The descendants of Dhruva, yeah. Right.
Yeah, then as.
How did Dhruva have someone like Venu? I guess because if they mix with one person that's bad, the mother was bad, right?
Just like Hiranyakashipu had Prahlad.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we see the power of the diminish gradually as the Kali Yuga progresses, and there's no head of society, to give direction to the leaders like that. And
Because the people have to know what's good for the whole society. If each person is trying to get what they need, it's like the dogs. My mother would feed her dogs, and they would each try to gobble down their own food quick so they could go and take the other dog's food. People think the dogs are so cute and they love us all so much and they have unconditional love. But these dogs are like mother and daughter, and they're thinking how they can eat their own and get the other ones quickly. I remember that when I was a child, we were outside in the backyard, and there was like a Thanksgiving dinner, and I looked inside, and the dog was on the table just gobbling the whole thing down. It jumped up on the dining room table and was just voraciously eating the whole thing. So this King Venu is acting like the animals. The animals have the selfishness. And we don't want to have this selfishness. But in this age, it's hard for us to remove somebody. Which of the leaders that are coming out good? I think Narendra Modi, he likes Krishna consciousness, and he's made things progress there. But so many things go backwards, don't they?
yeah, the monarchy was prevalent. Monarchy was the ruling class were the monarchies.
But then when the monarchy became not connected to Brahmins, they're even worse than democracy, because there's no check and balance. And they just think it all belongs to them. They live lavishly. You have people who are rulers of countries who don't live that way, whereas all these kings had. Once you have the selfishness in there, then the monarchy becomes worse than democracy, because they don't have to convince anybody, but they should have to convince the Brahmanas. There should be someone that's a check and balance for them. That's what's being shown here. And quite often there isn't. And quite often the people just like who they like, regardless of what they do. And it seems to be that way even more now.
Well, we see how democracy is also a failure, when it was democracy. Prabhupada called that demon crazy.
Demon crazy. But it doesn't mean that in this age, if somebody's a demon and they're a monarch, that they're any better. It's not the system part of it, but it's the people involved in it, and the people, how they exploit the system. That's the trouble with it. If you got the wrong people, any system isn't going to work well. It's like the communist idea is you share the wealth, but people say, I share the wealth, but after I take my part out. So I'll take a part for myself, and then I'll share the rest with you guys. So because of this selfishness, any system has its problems. But when it's like Prabhupada even said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if the person is corrupt, that's the problem, whether they got elected or a king. But if there's no Brahmins to remove them and they're supposed to be the king, then that's even worse. Because it's just like if somebody does a good job with money and you give them money and they build temples and they help people out. But if you give money to someone who isn't, they do all kinds of bad things. So the power is the same way. It isn't as if the system is as important as who the people are. But the truth is demon crazy because people vote for someone that they like. It's like they said that Walter Mondale was probably a lot smarter and a lot more principled man than Ronald Reagan. And they asked Ronald Reagan, they said, I don't see how someone who's an actor can be president. And he said, I don't see how someone who's not an actor can be president. Right? And isn't that the way it is? Right? Look at the rulers in this country. Thabo Mbeki probably was a lot more qualified than Jacob Zuma. But Jacob Zuma sings and dances, doesn't he? He's an actor. What? He does? He does? Yes, so see, they all have some good qualities and some bad ones, but people tend, regardless of whatever else has good and bad, they like someone who knows how to meet with people and put on a show. That doesn't mean he's any better or worse than someone else is. It just means he looks good. But he actually likes the Harinama. He came to the temple, didn't he?
In some ways, they have some good qualities also. We always focusing on the bad. As you're saying, you have to look at the good also.
Yes, that's why we have to try to find them, whoever they are, and increase their good qualities.
Yeah.
So what did Jacob, he came here, didn't he, to the open?
Well, the ANC had come here even before they came into power. They came here and Nelson Mandela bowed down to Prabhupada. They came and saw the deities, they had discussion with the devotees. Those things we don't really talk about so much. I think that's important also.
But of course, Nelson Mandela was, he's, if any of these have good qualities, they still don't measure up to what he had. He spent the whole day here, and when Indra Swami said to him, he said, well, I hope you missed your other engagement. He says, I hope I didn't ruin your day by you staying here so long. He says, oh no, today was the best day of my life.
Well, even the leader of the IFP, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was instrumental of getting him here in the first place, to come here.
Who was?
For the Bhakti Tirtha Swami was instrumental in getting him here to come, which many people probably don't know about.
Who did he get?
Buthelezi, who was the leader of the African party at that time.
Buthelezi, I met him here.
Yeah, and he came here sometimes. He came many times. Whenever he was in the area, he would come. So he had some attraction. So I think that was a good side of him also. We may criticize him on other areas, like he's like Vena in different ways.
Yes.
But I think we should look at the focus
we should, because Prabhupada says we go in like a needle and out like a plow. If we just try to encourage people, and instead of finding the things they did wrong, because that's why I was talking about the change of value. When I was eating the meat, when there was no change of value, why should I stop? So what we should do with any of these is we don't criticize any particular leaders, but we try to encourage some of them to come here and figure out whatever things they're doing good and try to get them to accent more on that. Because you try to change, like there was no leader, so they put Venu in and things got worse. So what we try to do with any of these is encourage them to come here or find the qualities they have and maybe get them to expand on those qualities. Prabhupada always said that, with the students, you find out they're doing something good. I said, but this child is such a rascal. Prabhupada said, then just say you are breathing so nicely. You'll find something good, because that's like I made the point with the people who are threatening or with the other. The point is you want to influence these things. Just like I didn't tell the people they shouldn't be threatening me and I'm going to do this, I didn't do that. The thing is to look for the goal and think we want to encourage these people who are already in the office to do a better job and to find some spiritual principles. So that's what we should work on, introducing some Krishna consciousness to them. And if they get change of value, they may do some good, just like Boris Yeltsin got the book.
Yeah. It's not, I've been a government official myself for some decades, so I have a good idea of how the South African government works, and I was working in the government service. So it's not easy to just change things, there's a whole process. But what I thought was that, if they come and associate with us, in that way, they will consider certain things they hear from us when they're formulating a policy. That is their Krishna consciousness. Yeah. So therefore, like you'd see that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj himself, he interacted with a lot of leaders, African leaders, presidents and prime minister, but he had some influence in them, definitely. Yeah. So
that's why it is. It's true. It's much better to try to keep the door open.
Yeah.
And part of is we give instruction with detachment. We give ideas to people, and if they take them, that's fine. If not, we don't say, hey, how come you didn't implement? But the main thing is to keep the door open
Yeah.
different people. Because if the door is open, and these are complex issues. Did I do something funny? What happened? What happened? What happened? Is to try to keep, as I Prabhupada says, you go in like a needle and out like a plow. You try to come up with something that influences people to want to come back for more. Just like someone comes to the Sunday feast, they may have all kinds of strange habits or misconceptions, but the main goal you should have is to make them want to come back again next Sunday. If you defeat them in a philosophical argument and you won and they walk away in a huff, that's not as good as just making a friend of them. Quite often finding out something about them and talking with people, it's quite often more important to find out something about them and see what they're doing. Can anybody else influence those ones like Bhakti Tirtha?
Yeah, we could, as devotees, we could influence them. We can invite them for programs.
Yes.
They come along, from time to time. I've done many like that myself, with Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj and others.
They're definitely more favorable than the apartheid government was. They were trying to get rid of us at every step they took. We've never had any trouble with new government trying to.
Well, you could look at like the rector of that time of Durban Westville, the Westville campus.
Yes.
Professor Olivier was very favorable.
Yes, I met him.
But he was an Afrikaner.
Yes.
So you could argue that whether it's like, one way or the other that, that Afrikaners behave like this and these people are more favorable than the other.
But you always find, in each group, you find someone who might be favorable and
Yeah,
someone
so
not.
you'd find that.
Just like when you're doing books, you may have one area where in any of the groups of people, some will take and some won't. And it's more important to concentrate on the ones who are favorable.
Like Prabhupada wanted to teach Krishna consciousness in the campus at Westville University. And Olifier's, was very favorable to that.
Yes.
But it really didn't happen. So later, I took that recording and the Department of Religious Studies, and I played that recording. And the person who heard it, they can, okay, we can use your book, the Bhagavad Gita as it is, as the standard book for teaching Hindu studies at the Department of others. Yeah. So it had an effect, So somebody it had an effect.
That's why it's more important, instead of arguing what points they disagree with, is saying those may be good, but the point is we're trying to get Bhagavad Gita in there and get the teachings, and so we don't argue about the others. We just try to get that in.
Yeah, that's true.
But we still have to look at some of the things in government that don't go well, but we're criticizing the ideas rather than any particular person.
But also, whenever you read about these type of things, like, about the government and things like that, I always try to apply it to ISKCON, or rather apply it to our own society than worrying about the government. They may not change. Like you said, Srila Prabhupada wanted a strong Brahminical society,
Yes.
So we ourselves should become strong. That's what I'm taking from this class, that we can help our own institution and rather than worrying about helping people which we may not be able to do.
But we can be a place that they can come to find out.
Sorry?
We can be a place they can come to find out. We have to keep things spiritually and materially in order so that there's not some big discrepancy or we can't keep the doors open.
Sure.
If they show up and we're closed and we can't maintain the temple, then we're in trouble. So it's much better to concentrate, just like I did with that girl. The point was to make her realize they weren't there and not argue with what things she did incorrectly.
Good, thank you.
But we have to see all over the world, the governments either are corrupt or they're not able to handle things correctly. But with a little change in thinking, any of them, Putin does crazy stuff, but he said at one party, they said, would you like a drink? he says, no, I don't drink alcohol, I'm a Krishnaite. And he kind of laughed at it, but the fact that he identified himself as a Krishnaite, even in laughing, means the door is open for something. So I think you're right in that. We can identify the qualities without having to talk about the people in particular. And if find someone's favorable, then we cultivate them. Cultivate means you plow the ground so you can plant seeds. If you haven't cultivated it, that's why it's called cultivating. If you haven't cultivated it, you can't plant a seed. If I just say, you're stupid and that and the other, do you want to come to our temple and listen about spiritual values? Cultivating means you have to create a place where the seed will be planted. So that's the best thing we can do with those people, is create a feeling that we can plant the seed of Krishna consciousness, not argue with them particularly over each of their things, because any of them can be influenced properly if we keep the door open and we cultivate the field. All right. Now, I hope nobody got the idea I was talking about how we should change a government like these brahmanas. And that's why I'm saying in democracy, at least there's a way to change the government. And that's why it works better than any ruler can be taken out. Even after a period of time, that's all they get. Whereas if someone's a king forever, so in this day and age, that absolute monarchy may not be so good. Hare Krishna. I hope nobody had the idea that we should be criticizing any government. People are doing that. The main idea is that we keep the door open and try to influence whoever we can. I didn't create that impression, did I? Okay, good. No, but it's a good point. That's why I talked about dealing with those people. You don't start antagonistic and then try to go back and be nice. You only go antagonistic when I actually have to sue someone for not paying for